Hi, everybody. Tom Murphy here, Men Talking Shop and Life Admin. It has been a while since we've connected with each other. Um, and at some point, maybe I'll go into a bit more of the details about that. Let's just say it had a tiny little bit to do with my fourth incidence of cancer over the last number of years. Some fairly dramatic surgery and therapy thereafter. But, that's life admin. We all have our particular challenges every day, don't we? So, along those lines, over the last couple of months in particular, having had some time to think, reflect, recover, if possible, was this category of friends and friendship. And how do you define it? Who are they? What is the path that our lives have taken on the basis of our friends, our allegiances, our alliances, our divided loyalties, where friends come and go in our life in the quote rivers of life. And one such close friend of mine, Bob. And I'd like to do a little talking about Bob because Bob and I have not really been able to get together in some time. We've tried to stay in contact as best as possible, but life admin has prevented that on both of our parts or challenged it to a large degree. So, if you don't mind, I'm just going to take a couple of minutes and riff and try to tell a few little stories. But, Bob, if you're out there, this is for you. I met Bob in and around October 2015, and he was living above us in a condo apartment situation that my wife and I moved into after relocating to Florida. And one of the first things that hit me in this going from a house to that type of living situation that was a bit of an initial adjustment is having common walls. So we were going to do this before we built our house. So one of the things that I remember vividly on our before we actually first physically met was hearing this vacuum cleaner above us starting early on Saturday morning and continuing for hours. And I'm thinking, why does it take so long to someone to vacuum for that long a period of time? So it was after hours of this, and at one point, it being a contained area, I came across this man, Bob, and introduced myself, and I lived below him and made a slight joke about his vacuuming. And is that a hobby of his, or does he have a vacuuming business and he has to run them for hours at a time? So, with that, this big smile ear to ear, and this gentleman, Bob, says, "No, I just like to vacuum, but let me ask you, where are you from?" And I said, "Well, I had just showed up, you know, um, directly back from the Northeast, if I put it that way." And I said, "Well, I'm from Massachusetts, um, and I'm from a greater Boston of Massachusetts." And he said, "Boston, Boston. I can't believe it. You know where I'm from?" And I said, "No, but where were you from, Bob?" "Well, I'm from West Virginia. I'm from West Virginia." And here is this man that goes into this riff, this routine of some of his stories immediately of growing up in West Virginia. I found it quite entertaining, quite engaging. And at which point I said, my sense is this could be an interesting relationship, vacuuming or otherwise. So at which point that was my introduction to Bob. We connected because of that arrangement virtually every day, and we became friends from that point. Um, One of the transitional stories from there to we moved a year later after building a house was that at that time began my cancer journey. And that was November 2016 was my first. And I was still living there at the time, had become friends with Bob, with you, Bob. And I knew I was going to need some physical assistance getting me from the car into the condo. And out of my own vanity at the time, I felt I needed to get from a parking lot past some buildings into where this condo and Bob lived up stores. I didn't want anybody to see me. And I knew I was going to have difficulty and it was going to be beyond probably what my wife Meg was going to be able to do. So I asked Bob, and Bob was ready. He practically was there with, bells on, pulled into the parking lot, and Bob helped me physically get into the house and get settled at that point in time. I kind of look at one of those first stories because he did that on a number of occasions for me, and it became part of our relationship. Where in the surgeries that I subsequently had for a variety of things, Bob would help me get from the automobile into the house. And he loves to do it. I love to ask him. And so Bob became this transition from the hospital and into either condo or into my house with that. And that just became one of those things that, was one of the first memories of me wanting to kind of reach out to you, Bob, and here you go. Here's some of those stories. So with that, we then developed this pattern of, let's go out to lunch, we'll meet, we'll go here, we'll go there, we'll pop around the area, great fun. Out of that, we ended up getting into a routine of going to Waffle Houses in the area. And you remember, Bob, we would always, what Waffle House are we going to go to today? So we ended up going to a number when we got together. We would go to different Waffle Houses. Why Waffle House? I don't think either one of us know exactly, other than it. We got a kick out of saying, "Oh, have you been to the one at Mobile and Fairfield? Have you been?" So we would do this thing. But leaning into some of the other stories, what begin to develop, Bob, you know this, Bob being very animated and really a flair for the dramatic himself that I think we both connected to. Wherever we would go, whether it was a Waffle House or out to the Gulf Ocean, where we would pick up lunch or food and go and have walks and lunch, whatever, to Thayer's downtown or jewelry store. I'll tell you a little bit about that. But no matter where we went, we would go to national, federal and state parks to meet, bring food, walk, good time, great, fine. Well, Bob got into this thing that, you know, one of the first vivid was when we were at a state park and going to walk through the woods out to this water reserve reservoir. And it didn't matter who we passed. Bob would jump, engage them right away, whoever they were. and had a routine about this guy from Boston, me from West Virginia, and we're best friends. Can you imagine that? Can you believe this? And he would go into this routine, the thing, but boom, sometimes, occasionally, like Bob, these people aren't sure, sometimes I'm saying to myself whether, you're attacking them, you're overwhelming them, or can they appreciate this, realize they've got a couple of dogs that they're not sure about you as you're doing this. But invariably, within seconds, people would, oh, well, this guy is kind of funny and he's telling a story about this, and isn't this kind of cute? And I can't wait to get home and tell our family about this guy that came over and told us this whole story. So whether it was Waffle House or a state park or the Gulf or whatever, the major piece began where we could kind of talk about everything. Um, we would share occasionally even about possible differences in politics, background, bringing up. But the key for me with Bob, and he would always say, "Oh, Tom, you got to write this down. That story, that was a great story you told me about that. Um, why don't you write this down? Can you write these stories?" Well, writing was quite honestly never my forte. And out of that, really added to developing, doing with my friend Jim Sparks and Leo Sandy and Tom Panis, doing Men Talking Shop with a theme of we still have stories to tell. So, Bob, with that in mind, as I've shared, I may not have many of these stories written down, but I do have our memories and our stories now on tape, not only for you today, but for anybody that chooses to watch and listen and maybe begin to think about some of the stories of their own lives. Bob, take care. I miss you. I hope we reconnect soon. Bye bye.